4 Paris-based journalists get to chew the fat over what's been making headlines in the last 7 days. Joining me in the studio is Navaro Pedro, the Paris correspondent for the Portuguese weekly Visao, Jean-Marc Illouz, a former correspondent with France 2 Télévision, Philippe Moreau Chevrolet, a columnist with the French news weekly Nouvel Observateur, and our very own France 24's international affairs editor, Douglas Herbert. And a reminder that you, the viewer, can also tell us what you think about what we're talking about. Just tweet using the hashtag TWTW. And the sigh of relief from Washington on Thursday could be well and truly heard right across the world. After finally signing off on a deal to lift the debt ceiling, the federal government gradually came back to life after a 16-day shutdown. But it was a bruising political battle, with Republicans looking more and more like losers. This after accusations that hardliners in the party had trashed their reputation and effectively handed a gift to their political opponents, the Democrats. Philippe, this is certainly not a done deal, as we know. It's certainly going to rear its ugly head again early next year, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe. But what we can say is that Obama is very good at this political game. He has been waiting and playing for the time, and he has won at the end. And this whole strategy seems to not to be possible anymore. And maybe that's the last time we see this kind of shutdown strategy from the Republicans, because obviously they ended up in a very bad position in the polls. And the polls are devastating for the Republicans, who were not so far from the next election. So that's really a good move from Obama. You know.
Well, I mean, we hope. I mean, I you know, from your mouth to God's ears is what they say. That we don't find we don't find ourselves in the exact same scenario a couple of months down the road. Because I mean, essentially, we have a temporary reprieve, right? The deal that was signed. What does it do? It temporarily funds the government through January 15th.
It weakens the Republicans. Eventually, they will have to.
A lot of people would
surrender.
say it would be suicide for the Republicans
Yes.
to play the same hand again and to try to extract political concessions, to use a shutdown and to use the threat of default of the world's biggest economy. Yeah, they're likely not to do that again. But let's not forget, Annette, part of this agreement was they're forming this super committee, this budget committee now, to try to reconcile the budget plans between the Senate and the House. They want to do that by mid-December. They haven't been able to do that for years and years and years and years, and they are extremely far apart on the very most basic issues on how to get revenue, tax, or spending.
So the likelihood of basically coming together and bridging that chasm between now and early next year is extremely unlikely.
Well, look, if you listen to what they're saying on paper, they're saying they want to find common ground, right? You have Ryan and you have the Democrat and the Republican that are going to head up this committee. They say we are committed to finding common ground. They would say that. That's the politically correct thing to say at the beginning of the process. But the fact is, when you look at their actual positions and how they want to raise revenue, nothing seems to be marching, and they have this thing called the sequester, which I'm sure our guests can explain as well, which is still in place. It's budget cutting by cleaver rather than a scalpel.
Jean-Marc?
I would say that the only ray of hope is the fact that until now, Benner, the head of the House Republican
Speaker,
he was under the gun from the minority and the extremist minority. And he had to knuckle under because the attacks were so violent. And now I think he has enough arguments to tell them, look, I've been following your extremist line, and this is where it has taken us. Now you let me run the thing if you don't want to be on the losing side at the next election.
So in your opinion, Boehner is a winner in that sense, in that he's gained the upper hand?
Well, I think he may have got the upper hand but I'm not sure, you see.
I don't know. This thing will show, I mean, there are many things at stake here. We'll see that the Republicans may have lost popularity right now, but I believe in the midterm elections, they'll have enough money because they had a whole class of very rich people behind them. They'll have money, and money is really determined today in any election.
Yeah, but the Democrats are
richest men in the US.
Second thing, the whole thing started with Obamacare, this very general social security program by President Obama for majority of Americans. The Republicans and the Tea Party were against it, and so were those very Republican, very conservative millionaires. The program is going to go into effect right now, and we are going to see how it's going to go into effect. If it works, Then, when it will come up again in a few months, the budget ceiling, then Republicans will be out of arguments. But if it doesn't work, if it's a real, sorry for the word, but a real screw up, as it seems it's going to be in its implementation, then they will have other arguments.
The implementation was difficult, but that's not a generous plan by European standards. That's generous by American standards.
By American
but
standards.
By European standards, it's very poor.
But would you agree that the Republicans have come off second best in this whole
Yeah, sure.
affair?
They have lost the battle.
They
obviously.
themselves say that. They say they themselves are saying
Yeah,
that
they
it was
admit that they
So
have
a
lost.
are
bruising
they-
defeat, unconditional surrender. In
So
the
is it a
opinion of
broken
some.
party, Doug?
Can they ever be reconciled? Here's the problem. As you said, you used the word extremists before. It's this ultra-conservative base of Tea Party. Now, of course, it's not just Tea Party that wanted to link defunding of Obama health care to the shutdown of the government and funding the government. There were other Republicans involved. But at the base is this Tea Party. And here is the problem with the Tea Party. Some columnists in America would basically say the problem is that they are blind to facts. You can't have a rational debate with them because they have their own reality. They see what they want to see. They believe what they want to believe. And if you do present them with what you think is a cohesive, coherent argument, they say no. They just don't want to hear it. The problem right now at the Tea Party is they are elected in what's called in U.S. politics gerrymandered districts, carefully
Districts
carved
where
up.
you can't
They don't
lose.
have. There's
You
no
can't
interest.
lose.
That will make
you
them
can't
very
lose.
strong in
And
the next
worse than
election.
can't lose, there's no incentive for them to listen.
Yeah, it's like Neuilly in France. You can present anybody, even a donkey with Republican
You
sticker,
see,
it will
I
win.
think one of
It
the
will
main,
win.
Jean-Marc.
this is a systemic problem. I mean, this American serious, dysfunctional manner of doing, business and politics, it's become a systemic problem. As long as there's no growth, there's going to be so much increased competition for power in Congress between lobbies. So this is not going to stop. And secondly, perhaps one of the basic factor is the way the primary system of selection of candidates works in the United States. As long as you have parties that can make their own laws, that state parties that can make their own laws, as long as you have heavy financing and very often unacknowledged financing, mysterious financing, extremist parties will be able to cinch, perhaps not nomination, as was the case with Mitt Romney. They will be able to cinch a number of things in terms of the ideological package of the party over the majority of their own party, and then do more business at the time of local elections.
Anna.
And from a European point of view now, of the whole thing of the budget cut, the expenses cut in the United States, I mean, who are they kidding? 2008, American debt was like 10 trillion. 5 years later, it's like 16 trillion. I mean, I come from a country where people are, kind of almost dying from budget cuts. That is no budget cut.
Okay, in light of what you just said, Philippe, how much damage has this done to America's image abroad?
Oh, no damage to America's image. I mean, you can see that it's a democracy. It could be popular, this system in France. In France, we love the two parties to be governing together and be confronting together. So that's we might love this shutdown thing in France. Maybe it's a kind of healthy way to
It's a concept that would
exercise
be
democracy.
very popular
Yeah?
in France. It's a concept that would be very popular
Yeah,
in
the
France.
two parties governing together to that point that one can block the other, it would be very popular in France. That's
No,
what's called
I
democracy.
disagree.
We have lost the habit in France, but that's...
Was maybe
I
the fault of
disagree
the
very
government.
often. The French see
That's
the
quite
American
awesome.
political system as ideal with a strong president.
No, we call
because
it
they
cohabitation in France.
Well, they
Two parties
undervalue
governing
the
together,
power
I mean,
of
we love
Congress,
it.
you see. They underrate the enormous power of Congress and its different lobbies. And so this is quite a shock that suddenly the powerful American system of government is dysfunctional. It doesn't work.
Maybe
And
there
secondly,
is a
may
bit
I
of
add
a
that?
fear that it could
On the-
stop. Maybe
at
there's
the
a bit of a
international
fear.
level, it's terrible when you have a small band of zealots that are able to prevent the President of the United States to sit as a peer with China in the region that is going to be pivotal for American diplomacy and business, in the region where America has always have a key security role. And the president just cannot come. I mean, this is just incredible. If you look at this from Asia, American is become America's become ridicule, and the Chinese love
No,
it.
that's democracy, come on.
And I think what people really like, what people did, if they envied or admired one aspect of American democracy, or at least of the founding fathers' ideals, it's this notion of checks and balances. It looks
Exactly,
and it
exactly.
sounds pretty good on paper. You have an executive, a judicial, and a legislative branch, and they all balance each other out. The problem is we only have checks right now. Nothing moves. There's no balance.
So who are the winners and losers in this whole affair? Doug?
Well, I mean, immediately the big loser, I mean, and the Republicans would agree with this themselves. The Republicans came out, they lost this battle. They miscalculated. The vast majority of Republicans don't think that they ever should have used what is Obama's signature legacy achievement in office, his health care law, as leverage in order to advance their narrow political ends, if you want to call it that, extract political concessions. The Republicans lost. Sure, Obama's poll ratings went down during the shutdown, and no one comes out looking great, and overall Americans hate Congress and they think it's dysfunctional. But if you have to narrow it to a party, sure, the Republicans lost.
Jean-Marc?
The big loser is the world of America. In terms of the dollar, security agreements, commitments to their international obligations, tradition, people for a long time were always looking to America to make decisions. What are the Americans going to make? Sometimes in a very foolish manner. For example, in the Middle East, people think that America is going to bring out a new plot every day, you see. So people look to America, even if America is only the first major power and not the superpower anymore. This is an extraordinary, consequence of the way Congress is run.
Philippe?
I think the Republicans are the losers, of course. I mean, Obama has been the best in this political battle. He has waited long enough in order for this battle to collapse by itself. I mean, it's kind of good politics.
Anna?
As I said before, for the time being, Republicans are the losers, but this thing is going to unfold still.
Okay, well, time to move on to another topic, and a resurgent Kremlin seems to be setting the agenda when it comes to major world issues. This week, President Vladimir Putin's chief political opponent walked free from a Russian court after it suspended his 5-year sentence for theft. But the conviction will prevent Alexei Navalny from seeking elected office for several years at least. He says he's going to appeal. Regardless, Putin seems to regain some of his swagger. Greenpeace activists have been put behind bars, a Dutch diplomat beaten up, and the Kremlin is banning Lithuanian cheese imports for its hosting of an EU summit with Eastern European states, not to mention a harsh crackdown on illegal immigrants. Now, first to you, Doug. You've worked in Moscow. Would you say that this decision by the court is somewhat of a concession, despite the fact we're seeing all these crackdowns in various areas?
Sure. Look, officially, Vladimir Putin, and he has said this, he says, Russian justice and the courts are totally independent. I have nothing to do with the decisions. Okay, now that's the official line. Unofficially, yes, it's a concession. And why do I think it is? A slight concession. It's not a major concession. I think Alexei Navalny cuts a very unique figure among the Russian opposition in the sense that he's the first one that has shown that Putin is perhaps not invincible. He is respected by both a lot of people, the types of people who might respect Putin, because he, on the one hand, is a real patriot and a fervent nationalist. He's played up that nationalist line, and a lot of people on the left and the opposition in Russia don't like that aspect of him. But at the same time, he's been fiercely independent with his blogging, with his anti-corruption campaigns, the very things that have landed him in this courtroom. So I think, in his heart of hearts, I think when Putin goes home at night, he probably looks at Alexei Navalny and almost sees elements of his own personality in him, and perhaps says, this is a man that I can sort of identify with. And he probably knows in his heart of hearts that in the future, this is a man who could be a viable person. They're far from it. They're not there yet. Alexei Navalny is not going to pose a threat to Putin this year, the next year.
The popularity polls don't show that, do they?
He is a man, he is unique among the opposition in that, I think, because of his likeness to Putin in many ways.
And you get a nationalist mob who's smashed up a vegetable market, and at the same time police are arresting illegal immigrants. What does this say about the mindset of the Russian government?
I want to first of all, I want to go back to what Douglas was saying. I don't think Putin has any admiration for his rival, because two alpha males,
Not
you know,
admiration,
can
identify with him.
identification
Different.
still, nonetheless. I think he can fear him because he can, but I don't think if he can put him away forever, he will
I think former communist leaders do not like UFOs. They want to be able to rely to link a political force to a machine, to a party. Remember what happened in China when the Qigong movement came up, and the Chinese government realized that they hadn't seen it coming because this was informal, pretty much the way the internet works. Navalny, in 2 years' time, in terms of political prominence to the Russian at large, went from 6% to 51%. And suddenly, you know, like skulking to prominence in the back of Putin. This is extremely disquieting.
And he got 27% in the Moscow mayor election. He came in second in an election where the entire state media machine, all the financing, all the party structure was behind the Moscow.
I would say one common
incumbent.
personality trait about any communist leader is being a control freak, and certainly that's one thing that obviously unsettled Putin. But I want to come back to this question, as I was saying, and I'll open it up to all of you. I mean, as I was saying, you've got a nationalist mob that smashes the vegetable market, but at the same time you have the police cracking down and arresting scores of illegal immigrants. What is it saying about the mindset of the Russian government?
1,200 illegal immigrants.
1,200, Doug.
Illegal immigrants have always been ill-considered in Russia, and they have always been chased by herds of people that are very really violent, skinheads, so to speak. It's a common habit in Russia. Unfortunately, it has been the case for many, many years, so it's not getting better, obviously. And what you can say is this scapegoating thing is getting European. We can see in France, we can see in every country in Europe.
It's a
And
worldwide trend, in
the
your
next
opinion.
European elections, for instance, will be devastating among Europe, not only in France, and it's kind of preoccupied. I'm preoccupied by it. You can be.
But you cannot forget that in Soviet Union, people could not travel in a free way. They coming from the republics
exactly.
that now are independent, and those are the people that are being cracked down on in Russia. They would have to have special visas or special kind of internal passport in order to, I don't remember the name, but in order to travel. And I think with all the difficulties, financial difficulties in Russia, with very unfair distribution of richness in the country that will not be stopped by this government nor by Putin.
If you can call it a government.
Yes, or by Putin, if you prefer. Of course, having a scapegoat as, the guy who's maybe darker skin, different eyes, different hair.
This has always been the case.
It's undeniable. There is a major ethnic migration problem. We know that in Moscow, like you said, it gets 90% of the investment in Russia. It is the magnet. It's where they're going to come. But I think we haven't said the words yet, and they need to be said. These were not just migrants. They were from Central Asia. They were from the Caucasus, Caucasian and Central Asians. And the Russians, they have a word for them. They call them the Chornya. They're the blacks.
But they've always called them that.
They're always that. But when
Even
they've always
during
called
the
them,
Soviet
they've
Union,
always
it
called them
was
that. And
that.
basically, what it means is, if you read between the lines, from my experience living in Russia, if you're not pale-skinned, white, Slavic Russian, you're practically Chornya. I was almost Chornya when I lived in Russia.
I'm very
and
olive
it's-
skin when
it's
I'm
very-
in
right.
Great Britain.
It's interesting to point out something else that pertains to Navalny. I think the Douglas analysis was very good in its relationship to Putin. You see, people in the West tend to see President Putin, as the bad guy on the right. I think in Russian terms, he's more at the center, with a lot of people to the right, you see, and then the grand old Communist Party
like
to the
François
left.
Bayrou, the local
Well,
François Bayrou.
I'm not sure I would say that. It wouldn't be very nice
No,
for
that's
Monsieur
a joke,
Bayrou.
that's a joke.
Let me finish this, because Navalny, from the West, might be perceived as the blogger, like a liberal guy who hits the bad guy, Putin. But Navalny, as Douglas pointed out, is not only a nationalist, he's anti-Semitic. People who follow the fine prints of his statements, of what he says, or what his supporters say, or write on his blogs. He's not Mr. Nice Guy. It's just a new generation, and he has this political animus that Putin recognizes.
And which is the reason why he's very interested in literally or figuratively chopping him off at the knees. Jean-Marc, I do want to ask you a question. With Putin throwing his weight about, as I was just saying earlier, is there anybody out there in the international community willing to take him on?
Well, you see, Putin managed to turn, he had, first of all, Putin offered and gave the Russians something they wanted for 10 years. That is, that he restored pride in Russia, after years of turmoil where, Russia had lost its empire, it has lost its clout, and he's restored that. But he's failed to restore some clarity in financing, okay? This is the internal problem that Putin will face, you see. But in terms of international relations, Putin had so far a spoiling power. And because he was very clever in Syria, he's turned the spoiling power into a new card, where he is somebody that you cannot bypass anymore, you see. So whether people like him or not is not the problem, you see.
Philippe, should the EU be worried?
About Putin? No, not at all. I mean, it's not a EU problem. It's an internal Russian problem. I mean, is Russia able to go to democracy? Is the real question we have all in mind, because obviously, it's tragic to see that they're going from the Soviet Union to this situation where nobody wins except Putin and some people around him. It was the case under every of his predecessors. I mean, it's not democracy. It's like a tyrannic regime. It's a kind of a feudal regime. It's not really pleasing to see that Russia is such a great nation. I mean, it has all these abilities, and it's reduced to that little spot, democratically wise, and it's sad.
Doug,
I agree with that, by the way.
Okay, I'm very glad to hear that.
I mean, he's right. The riches, the people, everything about that country, amazingly educated, cultured people. They're artists, they're musicians, and yet you have this rotten to the core, corrupt government that tarnishes the image.
My stepfather is Russian, so that's I may be oriented
Doug,
in my judgment.
I just want to ask you though, the Kremlin is sending out a very clear message before the Sochi Games. Do you think, given the amount of angst over the whole lesbian and gay issue, the fact that we've got Greenpeace activists, journalists in jail, we've had this Dutch diplomat beaten up, there's starting to be enough angst out there in the international community that there could be a boycott of some sort?
I personally don't think there'll be a boycott. Look, I could be wrong. There was a boycott in 1980 of the Moscow Games, obviously, over Afghanistan. I think that this is Russian behavior. I think that the West has learned that this is just the way, unfortunately, as you were saying before, this is the retrenching, the Russia under siege mentality. This is how it acts. It's the great bear that lashes out at the world, and you just have to sort of accept it, for better or for worse, in this case for worse, on its own terms. I don't think they're going to go to a boycott in this case for many of the reasons we were sort of alluding to before.
And also, most of the Russian people certainly support what Putin is doing when he's talking about gays, when he is treating Greenpeace demonstrators like pirates. I mean, those goes down well with Russian public opinion.
Anna?
And on top of it, there was a reshuffle of cards on international relations recently with the Syria case.
Yep.
And some people are also saying the United States do have retrieved from, being the gendarme of the world,
the police officer
of the world. Some people are saying, maybe in a very exaggerated way, that they are becoming isolationist again.
But isn't the
so I think there is some kind of satisfaction for Putin and for Moscow in all this affair, and I think they will smooth things up for not having any kind of boycott of the
fact
Olympic
that we
Games.
can't attack Syria tells a lot about this new superpower that Russia has become.
But I mean, isn't it the reality, though, at the end of the day, that Russia and China are authoritarian countries who really, at the end, don't want to intervene in other countries' affairs because they themselves
don't want
to
intervene in countries where they have friends and interests, but maybe tomorrow they will intervene in countries. We don't know what will happen you never know.
I don't think you can say that, because the Russians clearly in Georgia were not exactly friends coming over for a drink, you see. But and secondly, concerning the United States' role as a police officer in Syria, fundamentally, Syria may be an important piece on the board, but it's not strategically important to the United States, you see.
I'm terribly sorry, we've run out of time. I have to thank all of you for a most entertaining discussion, which I've got a feeling is going to continue out in the corridor outside of the studio. So at this point, let me thank my guests, Navaro Pedro, Philippe Moreau Chevrolet, Douglas Herbert, and Jean-Marc Illouz. And that's it for this edition of The World This Week. My colleague Tom Burgess-Watson will have more news and headlines coming up after a short break.